Good morning. So I'm Josh Corman. I'm going to talk really, really fast. It's going to be a little bit like a Ramones concert. But I'm trying to save some time to show you some pretty compelling video from something we did. So quick show of hands. Who's familiar with I Am the Cavalry? All right. You'll all be familiar with it shortly. So I'm Josh Corman. I'm one of the founders of IamTheCavalry.org. It's a volunteer group of white hat hackers trying to save lives through security research. Our basic observation was that the cavalry isn't coming on issues affecting public safety, human life, and the Internet of Things. And a bunch of us quietly went high and low throughout the government to find the adults in the room to see if we just got the right message to the right person, would they just fix it? And we really couldn't find the political will or the knowledge or the public support to do anything. And it was really depressing and overwhelming for a bit. But when you know the cavalry isn't coming, it's a bit empowering too, because then it falls to you. So at DEF CON in B-Sides Las Vegas about 5 years ago, almost 5 years ago, we sang out the call saying, will you be part of the solution? Will you be a helping hand, a voice of reason, tech literacy, and translator to public policymakers on issues affecting public safety, human life? So it started off as maybe a crazy idea, and we thought we'd use our hacker skills to fuzz the chain of influence. But now we're up over a couple hundred folks trying to do this on things like hackable medical devices, cars, trains, planes, automobiles, anything that can kill people. We say it's wherever bits and bytes meet flesh and blood. And there's quite a few people here at the conference that are part of that movement, and we hope that you are too by the time we're done. So I am also the Chief Security Officer for PTC, and I am hiring. So find me today or tomorrow. I'm looking for red teams that understand the additional consequences of safety-critical environments and Chief Security Officers. Chief Security Architects. Real quick moment, though. I'm really stuck on this lately. Stan Lee's health's not doing so good, if you don't know this. So he just did his last Comic-Con tour. And right before this picture was taken, he was still kind of like, this is his first public event after his wife had died. So he was pretty broken, and everyone's like, don't give him, don't say anything about his wife. He'll start, falling apart. But one of the things they said is, think about if you have the 30 seconds with this guy, what do you want to tell him? Like, say, how did he affect your life? And, I thought back to all the different things that he's done and helped create and drive. And it dawned on me that I said this at RSA, so I'm going to try to say it the same way here. If you can point to a single heroic moment in your life, you lived a pretty good life. And some of the people you're going to see in some of these slides that work in hospitals, they live a heroic career. I mean, they save lives every single day. And that's a fantastic life. And one of the things I tried to say to Stan Lee was not only, does he, embody heroism, but he inspires people to be heroic. And one of the things I think that this cyber safety movement and this vacuum that we're trying to fill requires is, a lot of us are very good at our jobs. A lot of us have had a lot of experience in our jobs, but have you had that moment where what you did actually affected somebody else, or might have saved a single person, or might have changed a policy that could save thousands or hundreds of thousands of people? And it's an incredibly intoxicating elixir, the kind of impact and work that these very generous volunteers have done through the I Am the Cavalry movement. Our basic idea is eventually things will get safer, but we want to do that sooner by working together with that helping hand instead of that pointing finger. And empathy has really been the core driver. So, one of the things we said when we launched I Am the Cavalry almost 5 years ago is we said people will have to die first before anybody's going to listen, right? It's just the nature of things. You have to wait till you touch a hot stove before you realize, you're going to have to make a course correction. So we did what any self-respecting hackers would do. We killed some people in Arizona last summer, almost a year ago. It was a simulation. I'm going to show a little bit of it. But we killed 3 people in an ER simulation. And there's going to be a couple pieces of content throughout today. In fact, a session just after this with Bo Woods and Nina. But what we really want to do is compress that mean time to aha. We want to get that corrective action before we have a mass loss of life. Because this stuff is fairly serious now. If you think about it, every single person in this room has lost a credit card. Our failure rate's about 100%. We spend a ton of money trying to protect credit cards. Don't do a very good job. Here we are in New York. How many Fortune 100s are headquartered here? Pretty much all of them have lost intellectual property and trade secrets. We really don't know how to secure anything. Our failure rate on a long enough timeline is 100%. So you can understand why I might be a little nervous that we're putting that same software into cars and medical devices and hospitals, and it's the level of connectivity that's leading to pretty bad outcomes. Now, everybody keeps saying we need a big one, we need a 9/11 or Pearl Harbor or Hiroshima and all these like really kind of offensive metaphors for what we need for cyber. Andrea Matwishin, a law professor, she had a very different take. She said it's going to be like this thing. This is a burning river on fire. Like, how do you put out a river on fire? So the pollution was so bad on the now site of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Ohio that they took this photo, but this wasn't the first time the river caught on fire. I think it was like number 22 across a 70-year period. So there were so many fires, and people just got so inured to it that they kind of tolerated the property damage, bridges burning down. But at some point, the consciousness tipped. They said, all right, enough is enough, and they had the Clean Water Act and then eventually the Environmental Protection Agency. So we don't necessarily think there's going to be a single event that triggers, a massive cyber policy response. We hope they don't, because usually that's a bad response, right? It compromises your liberties or it makes things harder. So I'd like to suggest we've had those fires over the last 24 months, right? We've known for 20 plus years you could hack power grids. Now it's been done, right? We know you can use Shodan to find direct industrial control systems hanging off the internet with hard-coded passwords that you can just Google. You don't even need to be a hacker, right? And now if you use, Autosploit, you can take the scan from a Shodan and pwn it with a Metasploit module without any effort whatsoever. So now the DOJ is unsealing documents that Iranian hackers and subnationals have been doing this. The one that scared the bejesus out of me was Hollywood Presbyterian Hospital shut down patient care for a week due to a ransomware from SamSam. It was a single Java deserialization flaw and a single JBoss library and a single medical technology. One flaw in one library and one device took out a hospital for a week. So I don't know if you've ever driven in LA traffic, but going up the street in your ambulance instead of to this one is not going to be a happy experience, right? Time matters. And they had to move critical care patients because they just couldn't deliver patient care. That was one isolated hospital. Now, what some of you know me from is when I worked on the Anonymous project with Jericho, we studied the rise of hacktivism. And what I was less concerned about was the kids doing DDoS attacks. What I was more concerned about is a blueprint of what would come next. And what we were concerned about at the time was something like an Al-Qaeda, because the barriers to entry were very low. We didn't even have an ISIS yet. But what I didn't realize is a member of Team Poison, a member of Anonymous, after going to jail, Junaid Hussain, an honor student from Birmingham, UK, he radicalized. His handle was Trick, and he started and founded the Cyber Caliphate. He moved his wife and kid to Raqqa, Syria, before he met a drone strike a bit later. But when he was killed, he was number 4 on the U.S. kill list. He was being paid dollar for dollar, the same they paid their battlefield soldiers. If you know the Garland, Texas shootings that were coordinated, he coordinated them. This is one bad guy, former kid from Anonymous, right? And the thing is, when you have 7 billion human beings, it only takes one to have the means, motive, and opportunity to take life. So there's finally been some story told on this guy, and I thought I had all the photos and video there was to get of him, but she found a few more. But this is deeply disturbing, and the Cyber Caliphate's not gone. He trained and recruited other people, and this city, more than anybody, should know what a few people could do. And it's not something that was even possible as a vehicle to harm us prior to events like us adding connectivity to anything and everything. So when I think of Hollywood Presbyterian, that was a single isolated incident. I'm like, if you could take out a single hospital by accident, what could someone like Trick do? And I don't think it's an if, I think it's a when. My bigger concern isn't that we'll have a loss of life. People die every day in hospitals, and we need to be grown-ups about that recognition. My bigger concern is that when it happens, it's not going to be a quick and agile response. It's going to be a very protracted on the news every night, like the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. We just don't have the staff. There's no investment. Now, we have been working through the Cavalry and through other initiatives on some first-of-a-kind cyber safety policies. We got about 18 done in the first year that Bo and I quit our jobs and went to a policy think tank. They're not perfect. They're very primitive. We're just kind of terraforming. We're trying to get basic things in there, like do you have the ability to patch your devices, stuff like that. We're trying to encourage coordinated vulnerability disclosure programs. One of the ones that was quite successful, I'm going to focus on medical for a lot of the rest of this talk. One of the ones is the FDA has been a fantastic partner. And what we did is we took our 5-star cyber safety framework that we had done for cars, and we applied it to very medical language. We call it the Hippocratic Oath for connected medical devices. And in it, we basically said doctors take a solemn oath, and they have a zeitgeist and a creed that drives their behavior. And as technology increasingly plays a role in the delivery of modern healthcare, we should have our technology support that intent. So it was very familiar language. It was very accepted language. And the basic premise is all systems fail. So here's 5 ready postures towards failure. Do you avoid failure, take help avoiding failure without suing the helper, capture, study, and learn from failure, contain and isolate failure, and inoculate against future failure. And these are basic primitives that we've slowly but surely woven into the pre-market guidance and post-market guidance for the FDA-approved medical devices, which had previously been unsafe at any speed. And Suzanne Schwartz and her team have done a fantastic job in making sure the future supply is better. One of the problems is we're still using the old supply everywhere. Now, I'm not going to go through this, but it's a good photo opportunity because we got a huge framework behind this. A lot of our best practices, quote unquote, really take some assumptions against this abstraction. We've been using this to help safety critical industries and regulators to say, look, when we talk about best practices, you're usually assuming a financially motivated economic adversary. You're usually assuming a confidentiality of information consequence. You're usually assuming a multi-layered network defense opportunity. You're usually assuming a Wintel stack or a Linux box. Some clearly defined economics about the VCs and the investors and who pays for what things and how much margins are. And the timescales are pretty predictable. But once you start getting to safety critical IoT, all bets are off. Very different consequences, adversaries, all the other things. Now, I thought that those fires that I referred to would actually change public consciousness or public policymakers' appetite or political will, and it was not any of those things. It was actually the Mirai botnet. So I don't know if you saw Bryson next door earlier, but those cheap $100 or less cameras did a doozy on the internet. Essentially, that long tail of low-cost, low-hygiene devices were a tsunami of technical debt that kind of crushed everybody. We lost the internet for a day. And the 3 defining characteristics that enabled that thing were, number 1, they were internet connected. Number 2, they were fixed credentials that you could guess with the botnet. And number 3 is they were unpatchable. So connected, fixed credentials, and unpatchable spell the recipe for disaster, where even the Akamai, math that they praised couldn't really stop that flood of DDoS. Took out Dyn, took out CNN, Spotify, a whole bunch of stuff. And what this did for policymakers is they've been told over and over and over for years is that if we try to regulate technology, we might stifle the economy, stifle innovation or hurt the economy. But what they saw was a failure to have some sort of minimum hygiene also hurt the economy. And they don't like the idea that we could lose the internet for days at a time, anytime we want. So there were some policy responses to that. There were some gray hat responses as well, where people said, oh, let's just be vigilantes and we'll start destroying these devices with brick or bot or things like this. And this is a dangerous precedent because it's one thing if they go take out an internet-based camera. It's another entirely if they take out an MRI or a fusion pump hooked up to a human being. So the first call I made after Mirai was to the FDA. I said, you know what else shares those 3 characteristics of reachable by the internet, fixed credentials, and unpatchable? Most medical equipment. So if the next Mirai is comprised of medical devices, we're in big trouble. Big trouble. And there's really no technical barriers to this. So this is the part where it gets a little scarier. I served, partly because I served on a congressional task force. That's scary enough, right? We did about a year and a half with 21 different people, including a lot of medical professionals, on how good or bad is healthcare cybersecurity. We didn't know about the Hollywood Presbyterian at the time it was formed. This came out of the Computer Information Sharing Act of 2015. To a person, even though there were some really risk-averse people, this is going to come fast, but we settled on, out of 20 uncomfortable truths, we settled on these 5 to highlight to Congress specifically. So notice the headline, with really scary risk-averse people that don't want to highlight any weakness. We all agreed on this title, critical condition. The basic talk track here is that our estimate is about 85% of the healthcare delivery organizations in this country lack a single security person on staff, not even one. So the big ones have a staff of 50 to 100 people. The small, medium, and rural, nothing. 0 folks. So if you're looking for a heroic moment, or you want to mentor somebody, or you want a different kind of a job, the hospitals desperately need help. So 85% lack a single security person. We have more janitors than we have security people. And as we become more connected, that's going to be a big problem. Number 2 is they're defending really old stuff. I think a lot of you guys know this, but Windows XP is often a best case scenario, and not only is it end of life, Windows Vista, its successor, is end of life. I still worked with Gunther when Windows XP was supported. I mean, this is a long time ago. So this is really hard to defend old stuff. So even if you have a big team, you're defending less defensible stuff. Number three, this is actually the government's fault in our rush to drive towards electronic health records, which was a good idea. We tied reimbursement, but we didn't really make sure we did it safely. So what we did is we said you can only get reimbursed if you can receive and transmit electronic health records. So 0 of those device makers made new devices. They took really crappy old devices that were never meant to be connected to a single thing and connected them to all the things. So you had a level of premature and hyperconnectivity, and it's very, very brittle. So even if you had a security team, it's often very difficult to do network segmentation and isolation because stuff just doesn't work anymore. Incredibly brittle IT. So this is why the blast radius of a single attack tends to be an entire hospital, which is number 4. Often a single flaw in a single device affects patient care. Everybody's so focused on PHI or focused on HIPAA. You know, we sort of are joking, but I'm getting more angry when I say it. We love our privacy. We'd like to be alive to enjoy it. And what we've challenged hospital professionals is you have more incentive to have a corpse with their privacy intact than to actually preserve available patient care. And no one disagrees. HIPAA is so heavily skewed towards the privacy of your data. And that's increasingly proven to be a big, big problem. So the overwhelming majority of the task force findings were on how do you preserve patient safety and patient care availability. And then lastly, if you think these outages will be rare, Billy Rios found a single medical technology with over 1,400 CVEs in it. And that's not uncommon. We'll see over 1,000 in many of these devices because they're just on really old stacks and they don't get updated and they don't get maintained, and people even believe you're not allowed to patch and update, which is not true. But the belief structure, the preparedness is pretty bad. So let me stitch those together again. You've got 85% of our healthcare has 0 security people on staff. They're defending really old stuff that's over-connected to each other and reachable by the outside world, like OpenSMB on the naked internet. A single flaw in a single device can affect patient care, and a device can give you over 1,000 chances to do that. Now, if somebody in here challenged me, then I'm exaggerating. This is bad. So we got a huge pushback from these hospitals saying there's no money in healthcare, we can't do anything, we can't afford it. You know, and they really hated this line, but I mean, can you come up with a better one? But what we've done is we just want all the benefits of connectivity, but we haven't actually paid the tax or done the work to deserve it. And I don't know what the retreat is. We're never going to go backwards. In fact, I don't want to go backwards. A lot of this patient care delivery is fantastic. It's so much cheaper. It's so much better. We're improving care. But we're doing it in a way that's not sustainable. So we tried to soften it a little bit. They were less mad, and I tried to channel my inner...
Sorry to interrupt. Is there a Seth Raw in this room? Seth Raw? Anybody know who that is?
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So we try to be a little nicer and channel our inner Stanley. You know, I might want to drive a tractor trailer truck, but I'm not allowed to. I have to demonstrate that I'm capable of that much vehicle, right? I have to show competence. And we haven't really even asked ourselves, how much connectivity can I do without a qualified staff? And I think it's going to be a lot like washing our hands, right? We didn't used to scrub in before surgeries, right? And we had lots of post-op infections because hygiene's a big deal. We had a lot of more fatalities after surgery. Well, it takes a lot of time to scrub in. It takes a lot of money to scrub in. It takes a lot of OR time and surgeon time to scrub in. But we do it because you got to do it because hygiene's important. And I think increasingly you got to see cyber hygiene's as important. You don't want devices just not working during a surgery. You don't want things rebooting. And this is happening. You wouldn't believe how many stories we got of people having wires in their body on the OR table and then something rebooted. Like, this is like, they just chalk it up to IT is flaky. It's not okay, and it's getting worse. Especially when any random internet noise can cause an outage, such as really terribly written piece of crap, you know, WannaCry ransomware. Didn't even bother to make a good enough payment mechanism, so it basically got almost no money. But WannaCry in a single afternoon, right before Mother's Day, almost this time last year, on that Friday, right before Mother's Day weekend, so basically right now, it took out 81 hospitals in the UK. That's 41% of its national capacity. And the types of institutions it took out absolutely killed people. It was stroke trauma centers. You get 3 hours when you have a stroke before you have total brain damage. 3 hours. So some of these conditions are time sensitive. And yes, people die every single day in hospitals, but more people died because of delayed integrated patient care. Now, one of the reasons we know this is about marathons. The New York Marathon, Boston Marathon, Chicago, and LA, I believe, did a study. The New England Journal of Medicine, they said if you have a heart attack during a marathon, you're statistically significantly more likely to die. So they pointed out you have a 4.4 minute longer ambulance ride, which translated into, I think, about a 7% increased mortality rate. Now, this had nothing to do with hacking, but the abstraction of this really groundbreaking piece of work from these physicians was that degraded and delayed patient care for heart or lungs or brain often lead to increased mortality rates. So that's what we're doing with the UK. We're pulling their Freedom of Information Act equivalent to see how many extra people died compared to normal baselines for that time of year. And it's something we got to stop screwing around with, right? So as the third leg of the stool, we had the task force report giving us a blueprint for how to avoid harm. We had WannaCry while we were publishing that task force report, occupy the whole federal government and our UK partners. US got very, very lucky. And the third thing we want to do is really make this palpable and visceral for the healthcare professionals. So we had been planning this for a couple of years. During DEF CON on our first birthday, in the green room, we bumped into 2 young guys that looked like they were wearing scrubs or something. And we said, "Are you guys physicians?" They're like, "Oh, no, we're med students." And I said, "Okay, but you're hackers too?" And they're like, "Yep." Like, that's kind of awesome. So we partnered with these guys, and a couple of years later, now that they're actually graduated, and we did the first ever clinical hacking simulations at their alma mater in Arizona. So we brought together FDA, FEMA, DHS, FBI, state and local government, the mayor's office, different hospitals in the network, and we did a bunch of stuff. So basically, doctors train all the time on exotic cases they're going to see 2 or 3 times a year. Like a pregnant woman comes into the ER and needs a defibrillator. 2 heartbeats, what do you do? Well, you train for it, so you don't have to ask what do you do. There's 2 heartbeats, you know exactly what to do because they do these trainings with great actors that understand how to present symptoms and incredibly expensive surgical dummies like this guy here. They bleed, they cut, they do surgery, everything acts just like the human body would act. And the doctors don't even pay attention to the fact that it's a dummy because it's underneath all this other stuff. So we had ABC Nightline do an exclusive on it. They did a pretty tasteful job to kind of show what the simulation was attempting to accomplish. We killed 3 different patients with 3 different guinea pigs with 3 different hacks. And what we wanted to do is make sure the hack was actually credible, because a lot of the physicians will say, so what if you hack a pacemaker? For 96% of the population that has a pacemaker, they just get tired. They're a little winded. They tell their doctor they're a little winded and they get a reboot. Like, nothing happens. It's not like in the movies. Whereas if you take a pacemaker defibrillator and you replace the firmware, you can give electroshock every minute on the minute, which causes a cardiac arrest every so often because of when you hit the shock. So that's exactly what they did. So they combined demonstrable hacks that have been disclosed, things like the bedside infusion pump hacks that Billy Rios had done, with how it would affect a clinical environment to see, does the physician know they were hacked? Do they properly take care of the patient in spite of that? Do they ask for an autopsy? All 3 patients coded, plural times. None of them thought to distrust the devices. None of them asked for an autopsy. And when we told them they were hacked, none of them actually responded in the correct way. So it was a very humbling experience for them to say, I guess we're not prepared for this. I guess we're not trained. Now, I don't think I can show all of it, but let me show a quick little clip. The guy in the white coat is the chief. He's the guinea pig. The guy closest to me is one of our teammates, Jeff Tully, acting as a nurse. I don't think it's going to play.
Case, I'm going to lay you down.
So you bring in an actor. He's going to say he has chest pains. He says he has these shocking chest pains every minute. He asks if he's going to die. They can't figure out what to do.
Okay. Yeah. Pace rhythm at 60. 110 over 74. Okay. On your count.
1, 2, 3. All right, sir.
So we've done 5 of these simulations now. We did one in New York earlier this year.
So I heard a little bit about what's been going on, but just in your own words, what brought you in today? What got you calling in?
I was watching TV at home and I started having these shocking chest pains, and it happens about every minute. And each time it happens, it feels like my chest is going to burst.
Have you ever had a pain like this before?
No, please don't. You got to stop it. I got a heart block, and I got a pacemaker, and a shocker, and I think it keeps shocking me.
Okay, do you know what type of heart block you have?
I don't know. Am I going to die?
We're going to try and make sure that doesn't happen today, sir. Okay.
So basically, he keeps getting the shock. He keeps screaming. I'm going to save you some of that noise.
Okay, so his rhythm is...
He passed out because the shock happened at exactly the heart rate polarization, so he's now coded.
All right, so it looks like
I can't
the
feel
rhythm
pulse right
here.
now. I can't feel
Okay.
So they'll do chest compressions. At the point at which they have to do something invasive, they wheel out the actor, they put him on a microphone, and they wheel in a surgical dummy. Its ribs crack, because every time you do chest compressions, you're cracking ribs. So they're doing second or third round of
Good
chest
job with the
compressions.
compressions.
They're trained to say that sometimes these devices are defective, so they have a magnet in each of these rooms. They put the magnet on the chest. The magnet's supposed to put it in a factory
And I
default
want
physical
you
safe
and the
mode.
key to rotate out.
But guess what the magnet does, guys?
Okay.
It triggers a software routine. Guess what we replaced? All the software.
Okay, so
sir?
So the magnet
we're
doesn't
back
do
with
anything.
our pace rhythm. Can we get? All right. Go ahead. Yeah.
So because we got a late start,
Pace rhythm. So now we need this.
at some point they have to intubate him.
He's currently in ventricular fibrillation.
So
They
we're-
call in a
yes,
specialist.
our Hold chest compressions. Okay. He's paced again.
All right, listen. If it keeps going in and out, the only thing you're gonna. All right.
What's the only
Try to
thing
cut
to
the
do?
chest and disconnect the leads.
So go right over the ICD, open the chest up, and disconnect.
So they decide to do an invasive surgery with an electroshock in the
Okay,
surgical
can we get
field
set up for
every
that?
minute. So they have to cut the chest open, cut the lead wires, because this device won't stop shocking the guy.
We still got a pace rhythm, he's still perfusing.
So there's a little bit of blood. I'm not gonna. It's fake blood, but it's enough to scare people. So I'm gonna skip
10
it.
rounds of CPR.
But basically, I
Good
believe
job,
the
everybody.
patient coded 5 times. The doctors just didn't know what to do. They weren't trained for this. And they see exotic stuff all the time, but none of them ever thought to distrust the medical device. The one that really scared me more was the bedside infusion pump. And if you know how Billy did those, he basically hacked the drug library and the logic such that it gave a 3-hour dose of a calcium blocker in 30 seconds. So it caused a cardiac arrest. So it was the right medicine delivered too quickly. And the reason that one scared me is when we finally told the woman what happened and why the patient coded, she had already delivered the antidote with the same compromised device and was really beating herself up. She's like, oh man, if I knew that the device was hacked, I would have grabbed the one from the room next door. Now, these devices are in every single room in every single hospital in the world. And grabbing the one from the next room would have done nothing because we compromised the drug library. It's just, what do we do? Do we buy 2 different makes and models? So we had an hour-long debate over what do you do now that we understand that these devices can be hacked and what we should do without complicating things. So I'm really close to the end of my time here. It's going to be an abrupt transition, but one of the reasons we want to create political will is while we have devices that are patchable, we have devices that lack fixed credentials, we are steering these medical device manufacturers and the FDA toward higher hygiene. The one device we helped the FDA get recalled, one of the bedside infusion pumps that Billy hacked, 2 years later, my own daughter was hooked up to it during the WannaCry attack. 2 years after the recall, my daughter was hooked up to the one device I knew could hurt her. Because the hospitals just don't even pay attention. Or they say, oh, it still works, it still blinks. You know, we'll replace it later. So what we really have done is we just don't understand how poor the hygiene is on these, and we are over-dependent on those undependable things. And there's a bill in Congress right now that's trying to do this for much more than medical devices. It's a Senate bill. It basically was a response to Mirai. It says you got to do 5 things, and we hate policy, so we just say, oh, policy's stupid, fire bad. It says 5 things. It says if you sell IoT to the federal government, you have to be patchable, you have to be free of known vulnerabilities, or disclose the ones you have. You can't use fixed passwords. You should use standards-based crypto and comms, or declare when you're using something funky. And you should have a coordinated vulnerability disclosure inviting white hats acting in good faith to report issues to you without fear of reprisal. So basically, it's an exemption at CFA and DMCA hacking laws. So those things are pretty commonsensical, and yet our kind is vomiting over ourselves saying, oh, no, don't regulate technology. If we're going to have these safety-critical devices unpatchable with fixed credentials, I'm not sure that any amount of our heroism is going to help. So part of the goal here is for us to find the things that are broken. But another thing is to make sure we're that helping hand and influencer, and we're advocating for things that might actually make our jobs easier. So there's a companion bill in the House. But the time isn't like we should get this stuff figured out over the next 5 to 10 years. We had 81 hospitals in an afternoon go away because of a terribly written piece of ransomware. And there's real no technical barrier. In fact, Bob Rudas, the chief data scientist at Rapid7, continues to scan the open internet for SMB. The population isn't going down, it's going up. We're not actually patching those devices. So everyone that got lucky 1 calendar year ago didn't actually go back and shut down their open access to SMB. So when we try to do these things, look for things like cyber supply chain hygiene. Do you have bill of materials for your third-party open source libraries? Is it free of known vulnerabilities? And everyone says it's going to break the industry. This is what saved the automotive industry. These are stolen from Toyota in the 40s. So these kind of things that we're really allergic to, we're going to have to hold our nose and eat our lima beans and figure out which policy is good. So it's not, fire good, fire bad. And I'm almost out of time here, but one of the things I like to point out is if you remember the earthquakes in Haiti that killed everybody, there's 230,000 people that died with a 7.0 Richter scale earthquake. What got almost no coverage or humanitarian relief was in Chile 6 weeks later, a much stronger 8.8 Richter scale earthquake happened. The reason it got no coverage is almost nobody died. Almost nobody. It was like 279 people. So 3 decimal points less fatalities. So why did a much, much stronger earthquake kill fewer people? Well, they solved for all variables and essentially came down to one thing: building codes. Chile had modern building codes. Haiti didn't. Buildings were shaken in Chile. They were flattened in Haiti. And one of the things we like to point out, the MITRE software assurance stuff, is with DHS and folks, we don't have any building codes for building code. And we really resist that kind of thing. But maybe if safety critical devices are on the line, maybe if this is oil and gas pipelines or maritime or aviation or high-speed rail, maybe the smart city of New York, we maybe need a higher standard of care than commodity stuff off the shelf. That was a part of the theme of the Rugged Software Manifesto. And because we're in New York, there's a reason we have these ugly wrought iron fire escapes on most of the buildings in New York. It's because prior to the T-shirt waste factory fire that killed all the workers inside, they couldn't get out of the building. They were on upper floors. That fire killed all the workers. So as a knee-jerk response, we literally bolted on fire escapes. This is my new building down the seaport. Can anybody spot the fire escape? Because we don't bolt them on anymore. We build them in. The very first thing they built when they were building this gorgeous building was that center column. It's the strongest part of the entire thing. It's not they build a building and then they put security on. Like, they design in resilient, defensible, rugged stuff in the structure of these buildings now. We're not there yet, and every time someone tries to make medical devices or IoT a little safer, our own kind are the ones that are pushing back. And I want to start changing our attitude on that. Because if we're not careful, it's that over-dependence on undependable things that's going to allow any accident or adversary, any trick or WannaCry or internet noise to not only have a loss of life. I care a little bit less about the people that die that day. Of course I care about them, but I care more about the crisis of confidence that this will trigger in the public or healthcare delivery professionals or people that trust otherwise superior life-saving technologies and vehicles. So we've had a bunch of fires. I don't know how many more it's going to take. But I'm hoping we lit a bit of a fire in each of you. This is your chance to decide if we're going to keep working on credit cards or keep failing to defend our enterprises, or maybe, just maybe, you'll find some way to do something that affects other people. And I'd like to tell you that the news is good. We have little glimmers of hope, and we have little pivots like FDA to hold up. But in general, we're getting a lot worse faster than we're getting better. I think we can turn that around, but it's going to take the attitude of people here to do that. So with that, I will end, and thank you for your time. Please go to see Bo and Nina next door, because they're going to show you what we did with the tabletop simulations, which in some ways were scarier down in Arizona. So thank you.